I'm Rabbi Camille Angel, and I'm delighted that you're joining us here for this reception and for the evening, for the memorial lecture in honor and in memory of our friend Al Baum. To welcome you, we're going to invite Pam to say just a few words of welcome, just welcoming just like I am. And then I'm going to turn it over to, I'll introduce our next speakers. Did I shock you?
You did. I'm surprised. Where do I talk?
Through the little, this fuzzy thing.
I'm Pam David. I was a very close friend of Al Baum's and
Closer to your mouth.
closer to my mouth, and Robert Holgate's. And with Robert, we are so honored to be able to support, to create this in honor of Al, but also to support our Rabbi Camille Angel, who's played a really important role in both of our lives. I need to tell this very brief story that I was in a very hard place. My wife had just been diagnosed with cancer. My mother was dying with cancer. My oldest sister just had a recurrence of her cancer. And for the first time in my life, as a very uneducated, unobservant Jew, I thought I needed spiritual support. And I went to an event that was actually honoring Marcy Edelman. And I saw Camille, who I had known from a number of years before, where we traded information, me about community organizing, and Camille about the Jewish roots of social activism. But that had been 10 years previously. She was standing in front of a portrait of Marcy and her wife, Jeanette, and I went up to her and I said, "I need you." And she turned to me and said, "I'm there." And she's been there for 4 years. And it's just an honor to support this program. And welcome.
It's actually been an honor to witness what a relationship like yours and Cheryl entailed, and also to accompany you through grief. So I'd like to ask for Robert Holgate to say a few words as well. Robert, I'm going to thank you in more detail at the event this evening, but I will just say that it has been an honor to witness the kind of husbandry, the husband that you've been to Al, and here we are a year later. We're on the eve of his yahrzeit, and it's gone by slowly and all too fast. So I'm glad we can encircle you with our love and pay honor to Al in this way, and please say a few words.
Yeah, you're right. It's feels like a week, and it feels like about 10 years. I'll just briefly, Camille had started working with Al a few months, probably 6 months before I realized what they were talking about. And Al was suffering. He was having a hard time, and he really didn't want to live any longer. For me, it was devastating, but I also understood. And you know who really helped me understand was Camille. Camille helped Al understand what he was feeling, what he was going through, the fact that he probably wasn't going to get better, that his life was coming to an end. And she helped me understand how to support him while taking care of myself, which we did together. And I'm very proud of that. And I've got to tell you, this program at USF is critical. It's bridging communities. It's doing something that's never been done before. And us, as a community that wants to help others, Mark, I think we've got to, or for me anyway, I know my life's mission is going to be furthering programs like this. And I'll just end it on one thought that came to mind for me last night. You know, thanks to Camille and thanks to USF, Al's memory will be a blessing. Thank you, honey.
So many ways. So I'll never like to be pigeonholed. I think you've heard it said or you've read that truth. And yet his role as a pillar in the Jewish community can't be understated. It was important for us to invite Danny Sokach to speak about and pay tribute to Al, because Daniel, you worked with Al in many Jewish contexts. So if you share a little bit, I know you could be the main speaker one year, but you have a few minutes now if you would treat us with some stories.
I feel like you're worried I'm going to talk to you. Thank you, Camille, and Pam and Robert. I'm really honored to be here. And if you'll indulge me for just a second, oh yeah, we may have to be further apart from each other. I also have a very loud voice, so I could probably do without this thing. Let's do that. I'm going to hand this to Mark Leno. It's really good to have a politician in the House. So I also just want to take a moment to invoke, right in this building was the office of my beloved friend, Bill Goldman, who you knew, Pam, professor here at USF, a board member of New Israel Fund, a friend of Al's who died too young, and so it just is a sort of a beautiful way to bring all that together. I actually wrote a couple of thoughts down about Al, so I could be succinct. I met Al first in 2008 during the interview process for the job that I ended up taking for 1 year as the CEO of the Jewish Federation.
Please charge.
Alexa has a problem with this, I suppose. I was interviewing for the CEO job at the Jewish Community Federation, one of the large philanthropies here in the city. And I met dozens of interesting and very kind people during this process, but I had a lot of misgivings. I wondered, given my background in community organizing, civil rights, Middle East affairs, whether this was the right fit for me. I came from a very progressive place. This was a pretty mainstream philanthropic organization, and people were very kind, but I didn't know whether I'd fit in with the ethos and the culture of the place. And then I met Al. And from the get-go, he made it very clear that I had a colleague and a comrade and a friend and a mentor on that board. I started my job in late 2008, in August of 2008. And in addition to the excitement, as you'll remember, in the summer of 2008 with the Obama campaign, there was also an undercurrent of real dread here in California, for those of you who were here, and of course for many people in this community. And that's because on the ballot was Proposition 8, which set out to enforce a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage in the state. And JCF, the Federation, was not at that point involved in this struggle at all, but I, the new guy, thought that it should be. I was brand new though, and I was inexperienced, unschooled in the art of organizing a board of a major central philanthropy, to take a stance that some might regard as irrelevant at best or very controversial at worst. But lucky for me, Al also thought that the Federation ought to be involved in this fight, and he knew how to get it done. And from Al, I learned how to do a new kind of community organizing. Let's call it the community organizing of the well-off and well-established. My wife said, of the rich. That's what you mean to say. Now, of course, as we know, Prop 8 passed on that election day, but not before the Federation got into the fight, funding opponents of the measure. We did too little, too late, but we did something. And it was Al's passion and his moral clarity and his wily organizing skills and his very considerable charm that made that happen. He was able to articulate to the leaders of the Jewish Federation the way in which standing up for LGBTQ plus rights was a central Jewish issue, that it was a core Jewish value, especially here in this city, and especially when that community was under that kind of attack. There was just no way that the Federation Board was going to say no to Al. Now, thankfully, a few years later, Prop 8, of course, was overturned by the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which led to a decision at the U.S. Supreme Court legalizing same-sex marriage for all Americans. And in a rather lovely second serendipity of the day for me, I'm very proud to tell you that as we honor here today Al Baum, it was my late father-in-law, Stephen Reinhardt, who wrote that decision for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that was upheld by the Supreme Court. And it's my father-in-law's, it's my late father-in-law's birthday today. And I just think it's perfect that on Al's day, it's also my father-in-law's birthday. So after 1 year at Federation, I was recruited to come lead the New Israel Fund, the position I've had since then for 14 years, and the great professional honor of my life. NIF is the largest organization working for equality and democracy for all Israelis. And even though I knew I had to come, leaving one big job for another big job is not easy, and it can ruffle feathers. And I luckily had a few big league cheerleaders who supported that move and made sure everybody in the community knew that they supported that move. And in the third serendipity for today, one of those people was Rabbi Brian Lurie, whose in-laws set up the Fromm Center, where we will be next. Go figure, it's a small city of ours. And the other one was, of course, Al Baum. And for me, going to New Israel Fund was like coming home. But for Al, me coming to New Israel Fund was quite literally me coming to a home that Al had built, because Al was one of the 4 founders of the New Israel Fund back in 1979. Now, to hear Al tell the story about the founding of NIF and his role in it, he was just the guy who happened to take the notes on that first trip to Israel. That's all he did. But that was just Al being Al, right? I've heard the story from the other 3 founders.
Low battery, please charge.
And this is what they say. They talk about how Al's grace and compassion and kindness contributed to the earliest tone and tenor of New Israel Fund, and how his courage put LGBTQ issues on the radar screen of the brand new NIF decades before it was on Israel's radar screen, or the radar screen, for that matter, of the American Jewish community. Before that, it was simply not a mainstream issue. Now, of course, that's not how Al described it. But lucky for all of us, a few years ago, 2 of my NIF colleagues interviewed Robert and Al about their role in New Israel Fund. Here's what Al said about that first trip to Israel. Quote, "I'd love to be called one of the originators of NIF, but I really wasn't. I didn't have, like most people do, a job that I had to be at in order to earn my keep. I think I'd already started my retirement, my first retirement. I'm not sure about that. But I think I was sort of available, and they sort of thought, why not? They knew a little bit about my politics and about my general self, and thought I'd be compatible with the 3 of them, and also that I would work while I was there and do what had to be done." But listen to what Al says next as he describes the origins of New Israel Fund in ways that could describe our organization right now. Quote, "I went to Israel that time as a tourist, basically. I think it was his first trip. We spent 2 weeks working, 6-day work weeks, from 8 in the morning till 10 at night. We accomplished a great deal. We met, if I remember correctly, about 75 groups, and we were exposed to the criticisms that a lot of groups had. I remember one was the Bedouins, because there were Bedouin villages being disrupted at that time, and still today. And so they were one of the groups we focused on. Another was women's shelters. There weren't women's shelters, not in the way that we knew there needed to be, so we got interested in that as well. But there were others also. I was exposed to criticism as well as enthusiasm and accomplishment, all at the same time, and both took. Both took. That sums up Al Baum for me, and it sums up the New Israel Fund for me. Now, obviously, Al was no mere note taker. His passion and commitment and wisdom shine through those stories, and in fact, he was articulating the very DNA of NIF and the people who built it. And all of us who are part of New Israel Fund today, many of you are part of that community, all owe Al an enormous debt for that. We feel that we're part of a community of conscience, a community that cares about sacred values of compassion, equality, and justice in one of the most precious and conflicted places on the planet. And for me, and for my NIF colleagues, especially here, especially in San Francisco, part of what makes that work feel sacred is that we know we're carrying out Al's vision and Al's values, and that we're safeguarding his legacy of what it means to be a Jew and what it means to be a human being in this world. And there's really nothing that makes me prouder and more grateful than being a part of your, Robert, and Al's community here in the city. And to work for our shared idea of the kind of world that we all want to live in. So thank you so much for asking me to speak today.
Thank you, Danny. Now I'd like to introduce Jim Chappell, who will share with us a whole other chapter of Al's service and success in our community.
Thank you, Rabbi. How's the volume? Does that work? For those of you who are standing, there's still half a dozen chairs back there, so don't be bashful, just walk right back and sit down. So, as the rabbi said, I'm Jim Chappell, former executive director of Spur and a close friend of Al's for 40 plus years. Al had many lives and many careers, and this evening I'd like to say a few words about his early career as an urban planner. Al Baum's history with urban planning goes back to 1959, to the reorganization of the San Francisco Planning and Housing Association into the San Francisco Planning and Urban Renewal Association. With a board of directors roster that read like the entire civic leadership of the city, the name Alvin H. Baum Jr. was prominent. As a young, talented lawyer committed to his adopted city, Al was elected over his 3 two-year terms to the Executive Committee, the Bylaws Committee, the Public Administration Committee, the Redevelopment Projects Committee, the Waterfront Development Committee, and chair of the City Planning Committee. It's hard to imagine how he did anything else other than Spur. Except at this time, the organization wasn't called Spur. The organization's name was literally but awkwardly abbreviated as SF Pura. Al, always a master of language, coined the acronym SPUR that has stuck for 60 years, even as the organizational name has evolved into the San Francisco Bay Area Planning and Urban Research Association. Most people simply know the group as SPUR. In his role at SPUR, Al helped develop how the organization works, as only a lawyer could. It identifies problems, investigates them, publishes policy papers, disseminates them in the community, and advocates for implementation. During his tenure, Al was involved in the reorganization of the Housing Authority, the reorganization of the Redevelopment Agency, the recruitment of a professional director of the Recreation and Park Department, and the really big one, the reorganization and strengthening of the Planning Department. Mayor Christopher had appointed Al as chairman of the City Planning Commission, where, because of Al's wide-ranging knowledge, even-handedness, and professionalism, the pattern was established for many years that the chairman of the Spur City Planning Committee automatically became the chairman of the official City Planning Commission. Al soon realized that all was not well at the planning department. As a gold rush boom town, planning had come late to San Francisco. There was no city master plan until 1945, and by 1959 there was considerable friction between the mayor, the planning commission, and the planning director. Al took this head on, resulting in the passage of a new zoning ordinance and the hiring of the first really professional planning director of the city. Al added a Master of City Planning degree from Cal to his law degree. And while all this was going on, the Spur Deputy Director, Joe Bodovitz, was loaned to a state commission studying issues facing the future of the Bay, particularly pressures to fill large portions of the Bay for development. This study resulted in the McAteer-Petras Act of 1965 and the establishment of BCDC, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. Joe Bodovitz became the first executive director of BC, and Al, armed with both law and planning degrees, became the deputy director. As a new organization, everyone was making it up as they went along, and here again, Al was very instrumental in making BCDC the organization that it is today. BCDC is a regulatory body, and Al developed a reputation as a ferocious regulator. He knew the law, he understood the principles and goals behind it, and he wasn't bashful about truth-telling, and he showed little tolerance for scofflaws. I suspect that there were plenty of would-be scofflaws who were happy to see Al move on in 1972 to form a planning consultancy. Soon after moving to San Francisco in 1977, I met Al at the National Convention of the American Planning Association held in San Francisco. For the first time ever, the convention program listed a social event for gay and lesbian planners at a time you could be fired for being gay, especially in the politically sensitive field of city planning. The address was a house on Green Street, and the host was Al Baum. When I arrived, we found the party and Al in his small attic garret, where he then lived very modestly, as the rest of the house was divided into rental apartments. The event attracted 100 people and was the genesis of a new organization, Gays and Lesbians in Planning, which successfully went on for 20-some years until it no longer seemed necessary in progressive San Francisco. Al's characteristics as a curious learner, a dispenser of sage advice, and a teacher made him the ideal role model, and we immediately cemented a close friendship that lasted throughout Al's life. It was working with Al that I first realized that the planning profession is really one of the helping professions, watching Al apply his professional skills and caring personality to help anyone needing advice. It was no great surprise to me then when Al went back to get yet another master's from Cal, this time in social welfare, leading to his successful practice as a clinical social worker. Al always loved giving advice, and now he had a legitimate reason and all the tools to do so, and he even got paid to do it. In 1966, Spur awarded Al our Lifetime Achievement Award, the Silver Spur, for his community activism, for his political and philanthropic support of liberal social justice, political, Jewish, and LGBT groups, and his longtime philanthropic support of Spur. But most importantly for me, Al was a caring friend, a trusted advisor on subjects professional and personal, an intellectual stimulus, and a model of how to be young way beyond one's years. When Al and Robert found each other after so many years, Al's friends were thrilled to see the new lease on life this deeply loving relationship gave him, and we instantly loved Robert also. On this, the eve of his first Yahrzeit, I cherish the memory of Al Baum for his life well lived, his positive spirit, the twinkle in his eyes, and for being a loving friend to me and to so many. The generosity of spirit of Elvin H. Baum Jr. has touched everyone who has had the privilege of knowing him. May his memory be a blessing.
Can you hear me? Is this one on? No.
it's an honor to be here. Is the sound okay? Okay. It's really an honor to be here. My name is Abdi Soltani. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Northern California. And I'm here today on behalf of the entire ACLU community. Dorothy Ehrlich, our National Deputy Director, who knew Al for over 4 decades. Matt Coles, the first attorney at the ACLU of Northern California dedicated to LGBT rights. Anthony Romero, our National Director, and all of us in the ACLU community to give our gratitude and thanks to Al Baum. Last year, we had an online memorial for Al, and this today feels a chance for us to be together in person, in community. But the online memorial shed so many different perspectives on Al's life that I didn't know about, and I'm gonna speak today about his role in the ACLU, his role in defending LGBT rights and the rights of all. But I'm going to talk a little bit personally as well from the perspective of my 2 children and the way that Al's legacy impacts their lives as well. First, to just share a reflection. I'm an Iranian American. My full name is Abdul Ali, which means servant of Ali. You cannot have a more Shiite name than Abdul Ali. I grew up in a Shiite family. I'm quite secular myself. But I just want to take a moment and recognize that we're gathered here in an assembly. An assembly is protected by the First Amendment. We're gathered here on the grounds of a university established by the Jesuit order of the Catholic religion, which also is protected by the First Amendment. I'm speaking to you today about our beloved Al Bendik, an act of speech which also is protected by the First Amendment. And I was sharing with my daughter Soraya that as a Shiite Iranian American, I would be speaking today on the grounds of a Jesuit order Catholic university about a Jewish man who dedicated his life to social justice at an event led by a rabbi for a Jewish program in social justice at that Catholic university at which this Shiite descendant Iranian would be speaking. How cool is that? I think that that moment of realization for me embodies Al, embodies the values that he worked for: tolerance, inclusion, equality, and the bringing of people together across differences. And at the center of that story of Al is the struggle for LGBT rights and equality. And I'm honored that we're at the University of San Francisco able to speak so freely and so forcefully and strongly for those principles of equality as it affects us all. When Al Baum first came to a meeting of the American Civil Liberties Union in San Francisco, the police department would regularly raid the bars in which gay men would go and meet each other, and they faced tremendous fear and violence just for the act of being in assembly with each other, in association with each other on the plane of equality. When Al Baum first walked into the room of an American Civil Liberties Union meeting in San Francisco, there was only discrimination and no legal recognition for the love that was shared by 2 men or 2 women. Through the arc of his life, through the commitment that he made to social justice, those rights expanded. That circle of equality became one in which he could stand with the person that he would love. That's the story of Al Baum. But in the course of those actions, it was never just about his own rights. Al, in his role at the ACLU, was there to defend the rights of all people, of African Americans, of immigrants, of Asian Americans, of men, women, and people of all genders. And that's what Al was about. When he became part of the ACLU, we didn't have an LGBT rights program, but the greater recognition of that need The greater support in the community led to creation of those efforts, the expansion of those efforts. In the course of his lifetime, he and Robert could marry legally under the rights both of the state of California, but also recognized under the Due Process Clause, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. That's our good friend, Al Baum. Now let me share what Al means to my children who never met him. My daughter, when I was telling her I was coming to this gathering and noting the confluence of religions, said, "Well, that's quite the gathering of the Abrahamic religions." That child of mine is quite the live spark. And when I came to the ACLU in 2009, and I rolled up my sleeves to work for the rights of transgender youth and children, my kids, that child of mine, was 5 years old. I had no idea then, in 2009, that I was fighting for the rights of my own child. Years later, she came out to us as a transgender girl. And because of the work that people like Al Baum had done decades before I stepped into the ACLU, there was a foundation on which I could begin my work, a foundation of rights upon which my daughter could step into. I walked into the Alameda County Courthouse and was able to change her name. I walked into Alameda County Courthouse and I was able to record on a piece of paper the gender that conformed to my child's identity. We were able to access health care and all kinds of rights and opportunities that allows my daughter to live her life as she chooses. These rights are under attack in Texas and in many other states, as you all know, but it's because of Al that my daughter has that foundation of rights. But let me tell you about my other child, and this is the unexpected surprise that I learned through the work that Al had done in Spur. My older child, Cyrus, loves fishing. We fish the entire San Francisco Bay. Every Saturday for the last 2 years of the pandemic, Cyrus and I have gone to a different spot in this gorgeous and glorious San Francisco Bay. That was the unexpected gift of Al Baum to the children of this Shiite descendant speaking today in honor of Jewish studies and Jewish rights on the grounds of this fine Jesuit university. Thank you so much to all of you.
I don't need this.
Yeah.
Well, that was quite a tribute. All of your words have been a tribute to lifting up the light and life of Al Baum. And the gift is that we have 4 more years of lectures and receptions to anticipate. And there are at least 4, if not 40 more facets of Al's life to lift up and pay tribute to. I'm very proud to have collected you all today in this way, and I want to get you over to our Frum Hall where our lecture with Dr. Edelman will begin at 6:30. I want to acknowledge Father Fitzgerald, who's here with us, the president of our university. And I also saw my colleague, Donald Godfrey, who's sitting right there in front of me, who's been a tremendous friend and colleague at University Ministry, and whose work predates mine by at least 20 years. I know that in 2002, the Swig Judaic program, as it was then called, hosted what was considered the first symposium of an interfaith dialogue on Christian and Jewish perspectives on homosexuality. And Donal, you were a spokesperson that evening, and you've continued to shepherd our flock. So without further ado, please take some more food. You'll meet and hear from our director, Aaron Hontapper, in just a few minutes. He'll be kicking off the program. But I'm Jewish, so I want to make sure you get a lot of food and something more to drink and have time to get situated over at the Fromm. And I also can't let go without saying and acknowledging my friend and hero, Mark Leno, who's joined us today. All right, so there'll be more name dropping in just a few minutes, but I'll see you over there at 6:30.